I guess people, by and large, are more influenced by things which leave the best possible first impression. They want things that make sense at face value, not upon any further ideological exploration or any personal work for them to do on their own, but just something that just makes sense from, looking at it for a few seconds. Or I guess some things are just chosen, some ideologies or convictions or whatever, because they're the default. They're just seen as the default, perceived as such. People, the average person, they don't have time or a care in the world to dive into, all these complicated theoretical subjects and so on to try and get an alternative answer to what is usually presented. I mean, the norm becomes the norm because it's difficult to deviate. I guess when you think about it, materialism is just a thing that makes sense at face value and thus people believe it. Or they feel the need to defend it quite thoroughly because if they didn't, it feels like their whole sense of self and of their relation to the universe and to life and existence itself, it would all be shattered, it would all come crumbling down. They'd feel that the world would be shaky and unstable, and it wouldn't be organized and neat the way they used to perceive it to be. They'd find that it would be, or at least in their minds anyway, chaotic, out of control, unstable. But the thing is that when you look at all the answers, all the interpretations for why do we exist, why does anything exist, there's probably not the most, let's just say passionate outcome. Well, outcome people could naturally be passionate about or would tend to be anyway. It's not always a positive, it's not always what you want, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's not always what you want. And that's the thing with reality, just in general. It oftentimes doesn't conform to what you want it to be. It creates you, you don't create it. Or at least that's one way of phrasing it, because of course in idealism, at least actual idealism, posits that, of course, with our minds we do create the world. But it's not a single mind, and even if we were to talk about a single mind as opposed to the collective consciousness of everyone, that doesn't mean that person has the ability to make anything whatever they want it to be. I mean, if that were the case, then we'd already be living in a paradise, or at least they would be. A utopia. Life would be organized and structured exactly in the manner that they want it to be. The very fact that they have stress, worries, and anxiety about this very topic is evidence that no, their mind does not create a paradise, and perhaps their mind isn't the one creating it at all. Maybe it's an external consciousness or something like that. Maybe there's more than just one person in the mix. Not that difficult to comprehend personally. But you see, materialism makes sense at face value more than idealism does. Because with idealism, you have to kind of explain how things work. Like, if everything is created by the mind because we perceive it, because we have it in our consciousness, then why did we seek to create this thing? If we are not merely a passive observer, but an active architect, we're architects of the world around us. We construct, we produce, we generate with our consciousness, the surroundings around us. Why does any of it exist? Why do we exist? Why did we do this to ourselves? What existed before our present consciousness? Did we exist at all prior to being born? I mean, there's endless questions that can arise when you ask, what is the truth of the universe? What is the key to it? Why does existence exist? And it's true, I guess with materialism, you don't really have to think about all that kind of stuff. You can just say, it's particles, it's matter, it's material scientific properties that cause things to exist. We have no possible influence over it. We have no interaction with it. If we were to cease to exist, existence would still exist, even if no one were around to ever perceive it. Of course, you also would not be able to perceive not perceiving it, but that's besides the point. In the materialist frame of mind, there's just matter. That's the only thing that really exists. Everything else is just this, interpretation, this illusion, a trillion separate, completely, non-connected things. They don't form a different thing. They just give the impression of that being the case. I mean, perhaps the normal implication of this is, I don't really exist, but just the illusion of me. You know, this is the whole concept of material monism. It posits, very simply, that all that exists is matter. And consciousness is just this thing which arises from matter, but really it doesn't exist. It's just a convenient way of describing what we're seeing. Nothing exists except matter, I guess. That's it. But here's the thing, that's the whole, we're just a machine. We're just engines that run on oil. We're just, mechanical beings. There's no spiritual element to us. There's no soul. The soul doesn't exist. And when we die, we'll be gone forever. We'll never experience consciousness again. And, that kind of thing. The complete rejection of all this kind of spiritual and religious doctrine that has, come up over time, really all of human history. But I guess now, since we're living in the age of technology and the internet and information and everything being so easily accessible, even the ability to just, talk into a microphone and record yourself talking about, ontology like I am now, like philosophy and stuff. That's so easy that people are asking this question constantly. They can't stop asking it. And that's crazy. And the thing is that, as I said, when it comes to positive outcomes, almost all the time reality just doesn't bend to what you want it to be. Like, if reality were nice and awesome, and everything were to work out, and we were to reasonably, understandably have complete optimism, nothing bad truly exists, then why do bad things exist? Well, not just bad things, but why does the current world we live in, the current climate, the current America, the current everything not conform to what should be? And I mean, outside of anybody's opinion, it's obvious that there are evil stuff. There's so much evil stuff going on in the world. So much evil stuff going on in every country ever. How can this be? Reality just does not align without expectations, without moral requirements of what should be, what should have always been. I mean, we could be living in some kind of fantasy or science fiction landscape where, we're all part of this massive story, like a movie, like some kind of, like some kind of Blade Runner world, or at least a world that's cool and interesting and you want to be a part of it. And I don't know, man. It's like, obviously the world is interesting by all means. It's fascinating. But there's also really boring stuff about it too. And, when we say to ourselves, well, I'm trying to be an optimist. When I die, I'm going to be reincarnated into my perfect life as a perfectly happy person with no downsides. Like, sadly, that's just not going to happen. Or else you'd already have that, you'd already had that utopia. Maybe one day, at least from a material, not necessarily materialist, but material perspective, when technology becomes more and more advanced, and maybe one day we will eventually reach an age of prosperity. True communism, no one has to pay no more bills, and everyone has housing, and everyone has every single thing they need, and they can have it produced instantly, just immediately, no effort, no work, complete happiness, like everyone's on drugs, They'll even probably find a way to generate the happiness as a literal chemical, like a drug we take, but with no bad side effects or anything like that. Honestly, I wish I was born in that time, something that hasn't happened yet, if it will happen at all. But then again, I can't deny the nostalgia from my own time, as a, member of Generation Z and all that. But that's the thing, reality often doesn't coincide with what you want it to be, Life, existence isn't. And so, the materialist interpretation, right, isn't even really a positive one. When we die, we don't go anywhere, it just ends. Well, clearly we're never going to get to a utopia like that. We don't have immortality. We can't just, live forever and live to see, a goddamn cyberpunk level future where we have everything, we have communism, we have a great world. No, it's not how that works. But we can't just say, when we die, we're going to be reincarnated in another life and it's going to be happy, or any nonsense like that. And we can't just be praying to, I don't know, lobster gods or whatever. We can't just look at something like Hinduism. Look at all the specific claims for all these deities. And yes, there's interpretations, is Hinduism monotheistic? Is it polytheistic? Is it, does it consider itself to be pantheism? It does, by the way, but that's the thing, like, it's complicated. There's many interpretations. What I can say, though, is that individual Hindus, right, who have this, specific interpretation of a very specific god, right, like some kind of deity or a bunch of deities they thought up in their head, that supposedly exist, they don't. Like, because of how specific it is, it's probably not going to be the case. I mean, technically anything could be the case, but I mean, it's not going to be. Like, come on, man, be realistic. So, look, that's the thing. The more specific we get, the more particular, the less likely it is to be the reality. And you just gotta accept what's most likely the case, right? And I'm saying materialism probably ain't it. In fact, for some time now, I have not believed in materialism. But I started this channel believing in it, in fact, quite strongly. And I thought in my, rationalist, atheist, like materialist, intellectualist brain that, all this, like, religious stuff was superstition, right? And that even the ideology of fascism itself could only go so far, it could only explain so much, but it couldn't grasp the whole. Because I believe that, matter is supremacy, right? I mean, all there is logic and the void, and ultimately you can carve out all these illusions and social constructions, but at the end of the day, we all just return to dust. We're all just a bunch of subatomic particles pretending we're something more interesting. And, like, that is an interpretation. I mean, you want to be this, like, Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson level, like, ultra smart, 400 IQ intellect guy, you want to be that kind of dude, and you want to say, oh, it's just, there was the Big Bang, there's science, and evolution. Yeah, of course evolution exists, but, like, no fucking shit it does. Virtually everyone agrees with that. Like, these people think they're really intelligent for pointing out common truths. But, it's like, there's more to life than just matter. Because if life is just matter, then firstly, life is very finite. It's very short-lived. And, I'm not saying that because I want there to be something else after death, but because I genuinely believe it is. Because initially I wanted materialism to be the truth. It was easy, I wouldn't have to think about it, And yes, I thought about it, that's all I do is think. All I do is think about philosophical concepts and theoretical things and all that. But, it's easier to imagine that we have no control over things. And it's easier to just imagine, well, it's just science, right? Look at how material the world is. Think about all this material stuff. How can these people out there believe in all this stuff? And don't get me wrong, there are absurd spiritual beliefs. Crystals don't have healing powers. You can't predict the future. Psychics just want your goddamn money. They're scammers, alright? Obviously, this is the case. And, obviously there are false doctrines, Hinduism, Christianity, etc., right? False doctrines. But at the end of the day, realistically, materialism can't answer all the questions. Like, the really important question, how could anything ever exist to begin with? How could anything, aside from, in the materialist point of view, from the materialist perspective, anything aside from subatomic particles even exist? The very fact that there are more than quarks, that quarks have formed bigger particles, and then bigger pieces of matter, and then eventually human beings. And everything that is all the planets, alright? The solar system, the galaxies, Earth itself, right? That's amazing. That requires some kind of design, some kind of intellect, some kind of imagination. Yes, imagination creates it. It's not just particles, it's not just matter, it's not just scientific stuff. Why has matter formed in this specific way? What causes it to form this way? And what caused it to form to begin with? Has matter always existed? Is it eternal? How can something scientific be eternal? You have to reference the concept of time itself. That's a purely material thing. So you're telling me it's always existed? How? Doesn't nothing come from nothing? That's exactly the truth. It had to come from something. Did it just create itself? And then you really ask yourself, it looks like the whole world has its own creator. It looks like there was someone who produced things in an intentionally autistic way. In a way that reflects beauty and memorability and passion. It doesn't look like a coincidence either. And it doesn't look like something that just some, AI would spit out, regardless of the technology. And AI still is a kind of consciousness anyway, so, But yeah, at the end of the day, materialism can't explain existence. It can't explain how we exist in the current way we do. The argument for imagination producing everything certainly can. We live in an imaginative landscape, an imaginative universe. Stuff is crazy, stuff is interesting, stuff is amazing. And materialism, because we don't live in a universe where there's just quarks, where there's just particles, there's just atoms and whatever, because we actually live in a universe in which these atoms and so on produce something that only a human imagination or a human adjacent imagination could create, something that a high civilized consciousness could produce. It reasons that materialism can't answer anything. There had to be something before matter, and matter is something which is, it's temporary. It's not eternal. There has to be some kind of mind at work to produce all the amazing, crazy, and beautiful things that make up our world. And how fascinating our world is. Look at the intricate details. Look at how it's like one giant art piece, like a canvas. And there's someone painting the canvas. Yes, okay. There is someone painting the canvas. Not me, not you, not mere mortals. Something immortal, something before us, and something that will always exist. Yeah. God. As always. So I think that the truth being told is that you can live in this delusion, this fantasy land of not even materialism, or at least not specifically, or not even idealism, not any kind of materialism or idealism, but just the belief that, of course the universe's truths and its fabric must conform to what I personally want. But that's not the truth. You don't get your perfect ending. That doesn't mean you get the opposite, you get the antithesis, you get nothing except pain and suffering and hell and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean you get that or anything like that. Not how that works, alright? It's somewhere in between, but I personally like to believe, and also because I've seen a lot of evidence to believe, that it's more good than bad, it's more positive than negative. It doesn't align with what I wanted, but then again, my real life as I'm living it doesn't align with what I wanted either. Why am I born on Earth? Why couldn't Earth be more interesting? Why couldn't my whole existence be more interesting? Why couldn't every single thing that has ever existed be more to my liking? You know how it is. Or at least that's just my take anyway. But thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.